GDOC 2020. What's going on? It's time to get the inside scoop on how to pitch your game to press. Now, have you ever wondered why certain games get a lot of media coverage and some don't? Well, this panel is going to cover some of the questions related to the news pitching process and offer some practical advice on what it takes to get news coverage for your game. Now, joining us is our moderator, Anna, who is a writer. She's a reporter. She covers video games and internet culture. She's a host at MinMax and a supreme trash talker at the indie games label Glitch. Shannon is an associate writer at CNN Business, also covering video games. She has worked at The Verge and was on Vox's media board for Asian American Employee Resource Group. Imran is a freelance video game journalist and also a co-host for the Patreon-based Kinda Funny Games. And Geeta is an award-winning writer and editor. With over 5 years of experience, she's worked at MTV News, GQ, Kotaku, and Pace Magazine. All right, let's have all the attention and love in the world for our panel as they show us how to pitch our games to press.
Okay, so today I'll be moderating this panel and just sort of facilitating conversation here. So some of these questions, most of these questions were brought to us by developers in sort of that wanting more information on how the pitching process works. So after crowdsourcing it, I went through and picked some out, and hopefully we can all bring some great advice to you today. So without further ado, we'll just jump straight into it. So the first question is pretty broad and kind of gets at the main point of this panel. What is your best advice for a small indie team looking to get coverage of their game?
I don't have to raise my hand. This is not school.
No.
Just constant eager hand raiser energy. I bet you knew exactly what kind of girl I was in high school. Anyway, I've been thinking about this a lot because for me, it's so much easier to identify a bad pitch when I get one than a good pitch. So I do think the general thing that a lot of bad pitches do is they find one game to be a frame of reference for to sort of what your elevator pitch. You know, it's really, a lot of games use a lot of similar kinds of mechanics, so using other games as a point of comparison can often help you speed along the process of getting someone on board to what your game is. But I think the general problem with that approach is you are immediately putting in my head an association with another game. And I have a pretty defined sense of taste. I know what I like and what I don't like pretty quickly within a couple sentences of a description of a game. I feel like I know whether or not I'll have a good time. And by immediately, in the very beginning of your pitch, making me think about another game, I'm already gone. I'm already not as interested in or am thinking about the thing you sort of forced me to. I see this a lot. For some reason, I get a lot of pitches for puzzle platformers that are like Dark Souls, the Dark Souls of puzzle platformers. If that's the immediate association you're going to make me think about, I feel like maybe you're not giving your game the best foot forward. I want to know what makes your game, even if it is really a really, really difficult puzzle platformer that rewards you for backtracking and opening alternate routes and has permadeath. I want to know what makes it different from all of those other games that are like that. There's a lot of games like that, turns out.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think when a game is unique, it has something that makes it stand out compared to all the other competition. Developers might know what's in the market, but they are purposefully not creating the same exact thing as someone else, but trying to differentiate themselves. That's when I could be more connected to it, and an audience and other gamers might be. And then there's some meaning to covering it. For instance, I'm thinking about Fall Guys that just came out, and it was so popular as an indie game. But the developers from Mediatonic told me they play other games like PUBG, CS:GO, other battle royale and shooters, and they wanted something that was completely different, that you could win even if you weren't good at shooting games. So I think they pulled that off, and that's definitely what I look for is unique selling point.
To bounce off what Geeta said a little bit, if you're going to make a comparison to a genre or an existing title in your pitch, I need like some proof of that, or not necessarily proof, just show me what is unique about your title. And like, that may be a trailer, that may be screenshots, it may be like a single paragraph explanation of why this is the Dark Souls of puzzle platformers. But I need that hook, because just telling me those things, I would have heard it 1,000 times that day.
Yeah. And you need to do that. Like, you need to do that up top. Like I have like over 1,000 unread emails right now. It's really stressing me out. And I'm not going to make it to the third paragraph, pictures. I'm probably not going to watch a video because I'm like listening to a podcast while writing, while doing, while reading all these emails. I need it might help, honestly, to think about it in the way that journalists, learn how to structure stories. You have your lead, which is like 1 or 2 sentences that sums up basically your whole pitch. And then your nut graph, that is a slightly more detailed paragraph, 3 to 5 sentences that has all of the important information in it that I'm going to need to know. Like, that can be the graph that contains like, oh, this is like the Dark Souls of puzzle platformers. But the lead has to be a story that catches me in the first sentence. It's difficult to do. What my old boss Stephen Patillo always used to say when we were pitching stories is that he doesn't want a man bite or a dog bites man story. He wants a man bites dog story. So they're, going off the Dark Souls of puzzle platformers. I'm sorry if you have called your game that in my DMs before. But going off that sort of very common example, that would be like a dog bites man story. There are a lot of dogs that bite men. Dogs bite. That's just what they do. When a man bites a dog, that's when I'm like, what the heck? Like, I'm more interested in this now. I'll read more than 1 sentence. Now, if you're looking at to journalists, it's not just that they're looking for a cool game. They're looking for a narrative to tell people. And you have to play into that narrative.
So transitioning into that, Gita, you mentioned that you have like 1,000 unread emails. Do you find, and this is directed towards everyone, do you find all your games through emails, or is it on Twitter? Where would you say that you find games to write about?
Yeah, I think it's like Twitter, it's Twitch, it's Reddit, like YouTube. I just like look at everything, and I look at what my friends are playing, what people are talking about. I do get email pitches. I do read them by subject line, and then maybe I'll click on it. I don't click on all of them. So it definitely has to hook me from the subject line and then going into like the first sentence. But yeah, I think I just look at, what is it that's grabbing the public at the time. But also sometimes I get emails from developers before they've even launched anything. So it's before that whole process of it reaching anybody. So even before like beta testing. And in those cases, I do go by like the studio or the developer. I already know them and I'm a little bit interested in what they have to make next.
For me, it's when I was working at Game Informer, the thing that would get me most take notice for anything, indie game, whatever, is if the developer or the or PR contacted me first and said like, hey, we have this game that's going to be announced soon, or we're going to announce a new feature or whatever, and we have exclusive content we want to like share with you. Maybe it's an interview, maybe it's just a trailer that we're not going to show anywhere else. Like that's kind of fraught with some other pitfalls here and there, but if you want definitely to get someone's attention, a big outlet's attention, that's a good way to just immediately catch them. Like, I know that you're not getting a copy and paste email. We're going for you specifically, that we want to reveal our game or our new mode or whatever in one of your news stories. And since I was news editor, that was more appealing to me. That it's like, oh, this is the same press release everyone else got.
Yeah, flattery works. If you demonstrate to me that you know who I am and you are specifically reaching out to me, I get a lot of people who send me city builders. I love that. I use all your codes. I am trying desperately to find the time to play all your games. You know, like if you know that I'm not just a generic video game journalist in number 47, that is super chill with me. I also think part of that is also you have to tailor your pitch to where the people work. There are some outlets where an exclusive trailer, that's like their bread and butter. They love posting trailers. That gets them a lot of, that's part of their business model. Waypoint, Vice Gaming, Vice, where I currently work, we're not really like a release date people. So I do get emails from people saying, oh, my game is coming out. Would you want to do the releases and news post? Just unfortunately, that's just not really what we do. Completely forgot the question, not gonna lie to you, but that's what I had to say.
It was, so are there any other places that you find games to write about?
Yes. Often when I was looking for stories, when I was writing more frequently at Kotaku, I would look at the Steam charts to see what it was selling, what was unusual that was selling. A lot of these things are predicated on the idea that your game has already found some kind of audience. Mm-hmm. But if you have a dedicated fandom in pre-release because you have been fostering that, you already have a community manager, or the game, there's this game that's sort of in development and is pitching itself as a competitor to The Sims called Paralyzed. So it's made a huge effort to show people their development process, and people have really, really been interested in watching this game develop. That means you can get, you will be able to say, oh, we have X amount of YouTube subscribers, or we tweeted this announcement and it got retweeted a certain number of times. Big numbers do impress journalists. Or knowing that you have a fan base that will read the article that these people, that you're going to be writing about it. It helps. It helps a lot.
And just sort of piggybacking on that, I got a question from a developer who sort of fits into that mold of already having like a pre-established audience, is really working from like a large Tumblr fandom of comics. And she wrote in with a question to me that said, a lot of news outlets don't like to engage with ongoing Kickstarters, but rather complete games. Who should you be talking to get eyes on your game development? And just to tag on to that, do you have any advice for folks looking to get coverage of game development itself rather than like a complete product? And is there a way to pitch that? And I'm sure it's very specific case to case as well.
So with Game Informer, there was a very specific policy that we did not cover Kickstarters unless there was like a very notable reason to. Like if it was like Yu Suzuki or Igarashi or something like that, that a veteran game developer coming in. So that's, I understand that's not very helpful for if you're not one of those people, but it also just does give you the time of, I'm not getting like headway into these major outlets because I can't, get them to report on the Kickstarter. And it's policy because we don't want to be seen not supporting, but funneling money, I guess, to one of these things. And if it's out of Kickstarter, if it's like post Kickstarter, absolutely, day one, email people, be like, hey, this just passed funding. Here's what this looks like. What do you think? Can you write a story about it? Go for it. That's the best recommendation I would have, is if they're not writing about it in that process, social media is your best bet, and use that social media like following to actually get it written about afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I was thinking, at Kotaku was a very similar policy, and I also just feel a little weird, feeling like I am sort of funneling money towards an unfunded project. I am a journalist. I don't do marketing or PR. So that's another thing with writing about Kickstarters, is that sometimes it can feel that way because we haven't touched anything. We haven't played anything. We can't say anything about the game really other than it looks cool. Like a lot of things look cool and don't get made. And that's, it always, you want to support projects that are great, but I have this other platform through social media that I can do that with. I don't necessarily need to use Vice Gaming. But I thinking about the example that Anna just said, this idea of someone who's kickstarting a game, working on the basis of a huge Tumblr comics fandom, like, that to me, that is a story. And that's something that's interesting that I would love to talk to that person about. Like, how did they leverage a huge comics fandom into turning it into a game? What is that process like? How do you develop that? How do you work with trying to reach new fans so you can fund this project while also appeasing your original fan base. Those are angles within that situation that don't rely on it being a story about a game that hasn't come out. Like, that's the kind of way you have to think about the stories of development, is that there's stories in every aspect of game development that don't necessarily center your game, but can still get eyes on the project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fear of writing about Kickstarter right off the bat before anything has materialized is that what if something never materializes? Like, what if, all these people pay money, but there's no product at the end of the pipeline? So it is better to have like the project like maybe give you like a sample or like some kind of idea of what to expect and see. And I think that having a story around the Kickstarter of like, why are you raising this money? Like, what inspired you to have this idea? And like, if that's interesting in and of itself, like if your life is interesting, you're an interesting person, like that would make the Kickstarter newsworthy from there. And it's less about the Kickstarter itself and how much money you've raised. Obviously, if you've raised like the most money on Kickstarter and like inspired people through just the sheer amount of dollars, like that would also be something that differentiates you. But yeah, those are just my thoughts.
Awesome. So we're going to, thanks for that advice. We're going to switch gears a little bit here and just, I was wondering if folks had some do's and don'ts of pitching you and talking to you and engaging with you. I'm sure the three of you might have some like little nightmare stories, but how can develop, like, do you have sort of like general best practices or just things of like, yes, very much do this, and no, like try not to, I don't know, send me a million emails.
Honestly, like the biggest top level advice I have is know what time zone you're writing to. If you're emailing someone in New York and you're writing them at 4:55 p.m., it's not going to get read that day, and probably not going to get read. Like,
I'm not going to read that shit. I'm going to.
It's like, I understand it's not always easy. Like, I was Pacific time zone while my outlet was Central time zone, but you like check the Twitter account, see where they're based, because it is very unlikely that you will get the results you want if you're not aware that the journalist you're writing to is a human that clocks off work at one point in the day.
Yeah, I'm clock out mode like 3 p.m. sometimes. So like I this happens to me a lot. I don't know if this is unique to me, but I think it's a general level of spot checking that you should do before you send an email. My name is Gita, Gita. Do you know how many emails I get addressed to Gina? A lot. My name's not Gina. You have to write my name in order to email me. Just don't if within the first sentence, I don't care about spelling mistakes or grammatical errors, really. But if you get something wrong about me and you are writing this email as if it is addressed to me in particular, it's just automatic. I feel like you are wasting my time. It just feels like a level. I don't want to be mean about that because I know autocorrect is also a thing, but you are presenting yourself professionally to a journalist. You have to understand that they don't have a lot of time at all, and that they expect like to be treated like a human being and not a PR machine. Other than that, yeah, I just feel like you gotta chill on the Dark Souls comparisons, please. I don't want to hamp on this, but like, I am a journalist who's like, I'm a person that's made it pretty clear that I really find the game design ethos and the world of Dark Souls very, very interesting, but I am not really interested in playing anything like Dark Souls. So if you email me like with something that is just diametrically opposed to my interests, I don't know what you want from me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely have had people like address me by last name, like Dear Liao, and I'm like, why? Like, what is this? And people have also said like, oh, I love your coverage at Wired. I don't write for Wired. Like, you're using the wrong outlet. You're copying and pasting from like some previous email you've sent, and then they'll just like apologize, like, oh, I'm so sorry, or like I have had a typo in my previous email that I never read, but like there was a typo, so they're just correcting their previous email. Oh, like that's 2 emails that I don't click on, and so that's a pet peeve of mine. But I think that overall, like when you're pitching me, I will try to read the email, but also sometimes it just gets buried. My inbox is like, I don't know, I get dozens of emails just like from my own company too. So every day I'm like, maybe I won't make it. Maybe I will miss your email. I work a Tuesday through Saturday schedule. So like Mondays when people email me, sometimes I miss them. And if the person like continuously follows up, eventually I'll get to it. But like if they wrote me once and then a few weeks passed, I might like completely have missed it.
Yeah, I don't mind a bump for my inbox at all.
Yeah.
Just please don't be offended if I just never get to it. I simply get too many emails a day. If I could read them, I would. It's simply impossible.
Yeah.
So related to that, I have like a little scenario from a developer and that I'd be curious on getting everyone's feedback on. So here it is I've gone ahead and written personalized emails tailored to writers who I think would be interested in my game. I did one follow-up a week later, but haven't heard anything from them. Is there anything else I can do to try and get media attention for my game at this point?
Hit that follow-up the day later. Hit that follow-up the next day. Truly, like just the sheer tonnage of emails that journalists like us get, it's like you can hit that follow-up like later in that afternoon if you're really desperate. Like it's truly like that's really real. Other than that, I mean, you have to look for people all in the world that would be interested in your game. And I know a lot of that relies on press coverage, but at the bare minimum, have a social media presence and have it updated and like up to date. If you can afford to buy a domain and get a website, that also works. It can be a simple, just a URL that goes to a Tumblr page. That works for me too. Just make your game Googleable and visible so that when you are sending these emails, even if people don't read them all the way, they can open a link that will be open in another tab and they'll see all the stuff. That's something that's happened to me too, where I've just seen an email, saw a graphic that caught my eye, and then was like, I'm going to open this person's Twitter account so that I can remember this. And there have been times when that Twitter account has been like last tweet was like 3 months ago. And I'm like, this feels like a dead project. I don't know whether or not to follow up. Or the tweets are sort of, professional and consistently updated and keeping people like on the level about what's happening in your project. And at that point, I'm like, maybe I should find a way to talk to these people and figure out what their deal is.
Yeah, I feel like Twitter presence and also like going on Twitch, if you find other streamers who like tend to like the type of game that you're making, like you could also like reach out to them with a code. I don't know if that's like outside of the scope of this conversation, but that's something you can consider. Also, if you look at what journalists are writing about and like their interest, like if you pitched me on like a witchcraft game where I can dress up my character as like Kim Kardashian style, I'd be really sold. Like it's like finding the interests of the journalists themselves and then pitching them on that as well. Like that could pretty much give you a bump up compared to if you were just pitching people on like sports games and they don't play sports games or whatever the situation is.
So would it be a fair sort of conclusion to draw? Because another question that came in was, does tailoring the pitch to the person matter more than finding the right person?
I mean, you do both, honestly. Like if you emailed me something and I didn't write about it for whatever reason, and you went to somebody who like likes the kind of game you're making and you're sure that they'll be interested, that's fine. And that like if they didn't take it to me and say, hey, do you want to write a news post about this? I think this game is kind of cool. I'm more likely to do that. But there also is a difference between doing that and going to someone to say, or come to my beat and try to get me to write about something because you went to someone else. And that's like, it's a very minuscule difference, but it's a difference that like will probably determine whether or not I write about something or not.
Yeah. I remember when I got my first pitch email from Kitfox Games about Boyfriend Dungeon. And I just felt like the pitch and the game were both made for me. Like absolute match made in heaven. I love dungeon crawlers and I love dating sims and I love the idea of dating your weapons. I love the art style. I love the trailer. I loved everything about it. I practically begged Steven to just let me cover the trailer, even though we don't. Sometimes he can be a little persnickety about what trailers, but it was so tailored to me and what I like that it not only meant that I've been tracking the development of this game for several years now. I actually met one of the developers on Boyfriend Dungeon last year at Games of Color, maybe the year before. I'm not really sure what time it is anymore. Yeah, I not only like been covering that games development and waiting patiently for its arrival in my hands. I've just developed a nice, friendly relationship with Kitbox Games, and they have sent me more pitches about more of their games that I'm more willing to now take a chance on, even if they don't sound like my thing, because I can tell how much they knew me in particular would be the person to cover their game and give it what it deserved, which was, the kind of loving coverage that I think it deserves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think those are all great points. And I also think that like as a developer, if you like open up access to like interviews, like you're available to speak with, then that also is really important. Like I know I was trying to reach like the studio behind like Untitled Goose Game, for instance, and they were just overwhelmed with the amount of people trying to talk to them. And I think the same goes for like some studios. They maybe like aren't as responsive. They don't have a PR team, so it's a little bit hard to get in touch with them. But like just like access from the like first step, like that would help so much if I could just talk to some people and then get some sources for my story.
What role do relationships and networking sort of play in getting press coverage? You both mentioned sort of developing relationships with publishers and studios. And would you say that, like that influences how likely you are to cover a game?
Could you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, no worries. Just like for developers, like how important is it that like they know you and develop a relationship with you? I think that there is this idea that like sometimes getting press releases all like a relationship game, and it's like, oh, if you know the journalist, then like you're going to get the coverage. But from my own experience, I don't think that's necessarily the case. And so could people expand on that a little bit more and explain to developers like what that sort of how important that relationship process is, if it is at all?
I think one thing that's important to understand is the distinction between a work relationship and like a friendship. I talk to my friends in a very, very different way than I do when I talk to people over email. I say fuck a lot more and talk about different things. I don't necessarily write about the things that my real life friends are doing. I'm not interested in being a stranger's friend, basically. But a work relationship is something that develops over time. There is an aspect of networking in there. There isn't any professional field, like the New York media, like the PMC, the professional media class is like a real thing, and it is a clique, and it is really, really annoying that it is a clique. Luckily, in the age of COVID-19, you no longer have to worry about being the kind of person who's good at parties. You can start to establish relationships over social media. Don't be a reply guy, but a fun tweet every once in a while does, it's a fucking nightmare, man. So it does brighten my day a little bit. It's not about seeking to make everyone your friend. It's about seeking to establish, like, here I am in this professional space, being an adult and doing my job. I respect professionalism more than I respect someone who's trying to butter me up. Like, if you're trying to send me a gift or something, I just think that's a bribe, and I don't want it.
Yeah, like my Twitter DMs are open, my Reddit DMs are open, regardless of however much spam I get. And it's like if you like message me something respectable, like, oh, look at this news that just came up or something, I will, be in touch with you, and I'll know that you're available for interviews if I need something, and I'll keep you in mind. And that's actually more useful than, if you could just also, some people might just like send me a press release and never talk to me. That's fine too. But when I'm thinking about story ideas, like pitching, it's to my editors, it's a little bit easier if I think like, I already know these guys, they're going to talk to me right away. I'm not going to have to worry that they don't get back to me after a whole week and the story is a failure.
Yeah, a weird thing I think people don't realize is like journalists are also always looking for sources. And if you're a game developer, you are a source. So you might just see someone who's like on the beat of XYZ, whatever thing that is also the genre of game you're making. Just email that person and be like, hey, I am working on this game, but like if you also ever need a source about this really specific thing, just send me a line. I might not respond to that email right away, but I will remember it. And that is the key.
It's also worth noting that like this is weird and hard to navigate in the COVID era, because it used to be I made my work relationships at like E3s and PAXs, and like I'd go to a cool demo and talk to the person and we'd set up an interview or whatever. And those things, maybe they'll come back someday, maybe they won't. But if they don't, like, yeah, what Gita was saying about social media is honestly the way to do it, because that is how you will find people. And if you don't get a response to something, it's fine, because we'll still remember you.
Yeah.
We'll still remember that email. And if somebody, a colleague or someone else at the outlet, asks for, hey, does anyone have a connection at so-and-so place or with this developer or this game that people are talking about now, it's good that we have those initial like steps that you reached out to us for. So if you can do that, then great. I think it's a good way to start at least those initial relationship steps, even if they don't immediately pay off.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Really quickly, I don't know if it's like this for you, Shannon and Imran, but at Kotaku and Advice Gaming, we have a Slack channel that's just for codes. So if you send us an email with a code in it, it's going in that Slack channel. The person you send it to might not be the person that is, using that code, but I know that, when I have a game that I think someone on my team might find interesting but isn't for me, I might not respond to that email where I got the code or I got the pitch, but I am going to try to pass it on to the relevant party.
Yeah, that was definitely the case for me at The Verge. I got to play a lot of like really funny random games. Like there was like a Taiwanese furry game on Steam. There was like PC Building Simulator or Art School that I got to try out because other people didn't have the time, but they had the code. Here at CNN, it's a little bit different. It's basically just me working on this stuff. So I do send codes out to like some of my colleagues who are interested in those games, and it's just me asking them if they're interested. But also, the emails sitting in my inbox, I do go back to them and I search for like a keyword of like a studio. So if you've reached out to me before and somehow your name comes up again, I'll at least look to see if you've emailed me in the past. And so even if I've never responded to you, like it's still there in the background in the history and I have it.
So the next question is shifting gears a bit. It's kind of like a media question. For those of you who spend your time thinking about media, I imagine that would be you three. So the question is, do we need more dedicated indie outlets so small games have a better chance of being seen? Because obviously everyone sort of has their own limitations at the end of the day, and not all, games can get covered because there are so many games coming out every day. Does anyone have any thoughts on this?
I'm going to say something that is going to make everyone sad, including myself, which is at Kotaku, I did really try to uplift indie games and indie projects that I found really interesting. I know Heather Alexandra, when she was there, she had a weekly column where she did that. She had Heather's Indie Pick every week where she made a point to find an indie project that she thought was particularly notable. Traffic on that is abysmal. And it's not like everything as media is determined by traffic, but it does give people a justification for continuing to do that work if they are being pressured by people above them to stop. Like there absolutely have been cases where like the answer to my pitch is just like, nobody's going to read this, Gita. And I can't really say anything about that because, in order to, I always think about it as sort of like a debt, like for every article that does like nothing traffic, that was a passion project because I wanted people to read it. I have to pay that debt with an article about what weird thing people are doing in No Man's Sky that gets hundreds and thousands of hits. And it sucks. It just sucks. I wish I knew of the best way to not just cover indie projects regularly. Like I come from a fine arts background. I used to run a gallery. Like I am interested in the experimental, the strange, the avant-garde, your tone poems, your games that aren't games. I want to play them, but it's just hard to cover them individually. Sometimes it's easier to cover them as part of a scene or a movement, but that comes with its own drawbacks too.
Yeah, that's 100% relatable to me. I think it's even more the case at CNN where, half of the audience or more of the audience is like non-gaming and they're just coming through this like, what should my kid play? Oh, Nintendo, right? Like that's what their thought process kind of is. But there are ways to cover indie games even here, and that goes with like who's working with Apple Arcade, who has raised money using itch.io and like the bundle to help Black Lives Matter movement and like funds, and those kinds of partnerships can help, but it's really a struggle, and I'm still trying to find ways to break through.
I mean, these are all inherently like capitalistic outlets, and at the end of the day, we need to do things that are going to get the views. And I know you'll talk to every writer and they're going to say we try to fight against that, but it's what we have to do. If Sony had an event tomorrow that had 30 amazing looking indie games and one God of War, 90% of my time would have to be on the God of War, because that's just what's going to get the most views.
Yeah.
So if indie outlets started springing up, it would be great. A lot of things that didn't get attention would get attention, but everything wouldn't. And that we're not going to solve that problem because there's just too many games, and there's certain like cachet that is going to come to certain ones that aren't going to come to others. Social media is a good bet, but even the big social media giants of indie games, like use Fall Guys as an example earlier, that was published by Devolver, which is a big indie label. Like Goose Game was published by Panic. Like the things that I get in my email every day of, hey, we just got this game, or my DMs of, do you want a Steam code? No one's really heard of this. It's just a thing, like a passion project between me and some friends, or we're a small studio. I don't see a reasonable way in the future, regardless of how many indie sites spring up, that will cover games like that in the way that those developers need them to be covered.
I have one caveat though. One thing that has changed for me going from Kotaku to Vice Gaming is that now I'm on the Waypoint Radio. And I have found that because Waypoint Radio, it's time-based media, we ramble, we go on tangents, we mention a lot of different things. And because it's not, fighting for views on a website, we have a strong subscriber base. So we get to be totally in control of what we say on it. That's the place where I can talk about indie games. And that really, really rocks for me, because I feel like given the amount of people that more people subscribe to our podcast during COVID-19, which is like the opposite for all other podcasts. Like no one's commuting anymore, but I guess they really want to listen to Austin Walker. Can't blame him, he's great. That is a place, I have a bunch of little indie games that I have like bookmarked specifically for playing and checking out for the podcast, because I know that we'll have conversations that do them justice and they'll reach an audience that actually cares. So yeah. I think, pitching to people who have podcasts for your indie projects, that is an avenue you should think about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think podcasts, newsletters, like other forms of media, we definitely can't count them out. And they're all ways to mention things that you love and that didn't necessarily merit like a full article or a full feature.
Yeah, or just someone who has a Twitter account that you like, a games journalist that has a Twitter account that tweets about video games. It may not be the exact like page views a Game Informer article may get, but if someone sends me something interesting and I like it, I'll tweet like the 145 characters or whatever of, hey, this game is really cool, people should check it out.
Totally.
All right, so it looks like we are running at the hour. Thank you so much for the panelists for coming here today. Where can everyone find you and your wonderful work?
Our Twitter handles are right here.
Right there.
There it is. Yeah. So feel free to follow all these lovely people on Twitter. And I mean, you heard Gita, pitch people and follow up and find people with podcasts. And thank you so much to Game Devs of Color for having us here today. Are there any other last minute plugs that folks would like to share before we wrap up? Your shows, your projects, just so that the audience here can get another link to your work?
Yeah, DM me on Twitter. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, same for me. Just find me on Twitter and DM me through there.
I got open DMs. I'm sorry if I don't respond to you, but I definitely read all of them.
Yeah, same.
Awesome. Well, thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Anna, and the rest of the panel for what for me is really an eye-opening discussion. There were some things I definitely didn't think about. I know that as journalists, your integrity is always on the line. And when you mentioned the whole Kickstarter thing, yeah, I can get that some people would want you to, write about their Kickstarter, but because it's not actually funded just yet, it's almost like you're kind of trying to source, funding for them, which can get kind of dicey. So I completely get that. And I think, maybe a lot of people didn't get that before. So this was a really, really good discussion, and a lot of great information came out of it. So thank you very much. For those of you watching, comment, share. If you have if you have other questions that maybe weren't covered, make sure that you post and share them. And thank you so very much for watching. Keep it locked in. Much more where this came from.